I'd love to talk a little bit about at the beginning, just again, like astrology in general, if that's okay. And like why, like why is it important or what are we doing here with it other than making memes? Memes to me, the exciting part of astrology these days is memes. And it's like the episode. I think there's a thing in The Simpsons. When I used to watch television, it was like, it's funny because it's true. And it's like, yeah, okay, it is.
It is. It is.
Okay.
Welcome
To another episode of
as
Woo as
you
Want
with
Celine and
Jeremiah and
Leslie Galbraith.
Yay! So excited you're here.
Thanks for having me, you guys. Good to see you.
Yeah.
So good to see you. And thank you everyone for joining us. We know it's been a bit of a break. We took a little August vacay, but we're back. School's in session. And
season.
Yeah. Virgo season.
Exactly. It's Virgo season and schools also it's astrology schools in session. So
I love that.
We're super excited to have Leslie back on the pod. If anyone doesn't know about Leslie, we've done 2 episodes with her. And so you can learn all about Leslie in those episodes. But this time we're just going to dive right in. So there's a lot to catch up on. Last time we spoke, it was 2019.
Yeah.
A few things have happened in those 3 years. Just a couple of things. So Leslie, you wanted to start off just with like kind of a general overview of astrology. So do you want to just go into that?
And this is something, I've been doing this for 12 years now. And as I've been on this journey, more and more, and especially since 2020, which we're going to talk about the alignment that happened then too. I really start to understand in a different way, working with thousands of people, how much we plan our life. So a lot of different, all the different religions, all the different ideas and the stories. When it comes down to astrology and really what the magic of it is that your birth chart is your divine plan that is divined by you.
Ooh.
And you might work with source, God, love, creation, all that is, whatever we want to call it, together to form who you are going to be. So our birth chart is so amazing because it describes our energy, it describes our elements, it describes our field, our characteristics, our gifts that we're so good at, because all of us have a unique frequency that is not like anyone else's, right? And everyone has their own truth. This is why right now it's so wild with all this information, because it's like this diet and this diet and this and try this and keto. And it's like, what works for you?
I love that.
What works for your body? So your chart has all of that information in. It talks about your elemental balance, which is major, and Chinese medicine. It talks about there's so many amazing gems to discover in your chart.
Yeah.
Help you remember who you planned to be. Not who you're just coming in, like who you planned to be. So I think in a way, we plan our life, our birth. And I think in some ways there is a story that we have a plan for our exit as well. Like we don't remember that. We don't know what that is. But when I'm looking at charts and I'm working with clients, it's endlessly mind-blowing and fascinating on how always so accurate everything is. And
Yeah.
it drives me wild. I'm like, how can this be so accurate? Like, how can this alignment be happening and you're going through this thing on the exact day? Well, that's because when we come into our human form, I think that we are here to enjoy life, have an experience of connection, experience the earth, learn through relationships, and we all have lessons.
Mm.
And lately I've been calling it like your syllabus. You got your
Ooh.
like syllabus. You have your outline of what
Mm.
your soul is here to work on and to grow and all of those gifts. And that information is all coded, not only in our DNA, our genetics, it's all coded in our chart.
Yeah.
So why I wanted to just talk about this a little bit at the beginning is because astrology has become so popular, especially in the last 5 years.
Yep.
Which is amazing. But it's become also on some level a little shallow in a way, because there's a lot
Yeah.
of what they're saying, like memes and funny things, and that's all great because there's humor and we all need to laugh like more all the time. Like every day, all day long. You want to be healthy? Laugh. Okay. So we have to so that popularity of astrology is very fun. Okay. And there's a lot of different things that it can serve in that way. But astrology is like infinitely more than just that. It's such a powerful tool. Like all these tools, esoteric tools, tarot tools, palmistry, acupuncture, energy, all these are tools. Astrology is just another form of divination.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I love about it. This is Marie von Franz, who was one of Carl Jung's close associates. She wrote this book on divination. And she talks about the I Ching and astrology and tarot. What it does is it brings and welcomes the element of chance.
Mm.
And it brings and welcomes into the room an opportunity for intuition and chance energy to interact. Where we have all this science today, which is like, prove this, right? Prove this, but then at the same time, it's like, can we ever really prove anything?
Yeah.
Really see it, like it's like, so we have this, but this is not, astrology is an art and a science together, but it's really a tool of divination that welcomes the connection to source.
Yeah.
Right. And so with our chart, we have, as a human, we're going to have a life cycle. And I always like to say, I hope everyone gets to at least one Uranus around your chart, which is 84 degrees or 84 years old. Like, right. I'm like, hopefully everybody gets, not everybody's gonna, but I'd like to say that could be a nice lifespan, 84. So in our life, there are always ages that everyone is going to go through a theme.
A transit.
Exactly. And that in the chart. And that's something more like what the popular one is Saturn return, right?
Yep.
It happens for everybody, 28, 29, 30, 58, 59, 60, and the 80s if you get there. That is a time of maturity and growth. Okay. And that's a life cycle everyone is going to experience. So there's tons of these ages in astrology that you will always hit. 50 is another major one. 50 to 51, everyone has their Chiron return. So everyone, and this is when we think of like midlife crisis, it's like, no, are you who you plan to be?
Yeah.
Well, if you haven't figured it out at 50, then you're a little bit more push and a little bit more prod and a little bit more poke to go a little deeper. And then at 50, we often see a lot of people who really come into their mastery, right? Know who they are. They've had so many hours that they spend on whatever they're doing and their interests, and they really come in. So we have these life cycles. And these are important for everybody. And
Right.
then in our chart, we have our own personal roadmap. And just like you said, Celine, they're transits. So what is a transit? A planet is in the sky, in a place, in a position that you have in your field, stamped in your energy field. So there's an interaction between the fields.
Right.
So we also have all of these plans for ourselves that will be the transits. And that is something that is very much, in a way, contracted or written. And you will meet certain people at certain ages because of that transit. And that's when you decided to come together. That's what people like your soul family, your soul contracts. So we actually have a lot more than I think people talk about or understand of our life plan for what we're going to be doing here.
Right.
And astrology is that language that helps us understand the deeper meaning and more awareness and kind of brings it back to who are we and what are we here to experience?
Yeah.
So our astrology birth chart is our divine clock. And it is our truth. And that clock is on time. It's like a German train. It's not going to be late.
It's not late. That's
Because
so
oh, sorry, go ahead.
well, I mean everything it's just like so on point and so well explained. And I also I think that there's something to learning about your chart or just knowing the weather and the planets and what they're doing that offers a little bit of comfort perhaps when you feel more chaotic, because it's a transit, it's a phase, it will last I don't know, a couple years, a year, a couple months, a week or something. And I think that I think we seek to understand so much of ourselves as humans, and there's an element of control that we get comfort with, but at the end of the
Cappy Cap.
day, huh?
I said, okay, Cappy Cap.
Well, but I mean, don't you agree? Like that's why people like
No, I
seek
know.
like
Joking.
all
No,
these like but I think astrology to me is almost like a divine order in the cosmos.
Yeah.
That like, it's like that like Carl Jung quote or something. There is an order in the disorder or something,
And
yeah. So
it's so freeing to know in some ways, like one, we're all responsible for ourselves, but two, everything is going right along to schedule.
yeah.
Our schedule.
Yeah. I love that you said that. It's so freeing, right? Because that's the irony. It's like there's like a plan, and yet the more you know the plan, there's almost something more freeing than if you don't know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it like takes it down a notch.
It does. And so this is really what astrology is for me is really about, is really getting it. And exactly what you're saying too about so many of my clients, they're going through a crossroads. I mean, the majority of people have some kind of choices that they're facing or some next thing that they're feeling and they don't know. And they're like, what is happening?
Yeah.
And so when we're looking at the chart and we're reading it through all of these patterns, it's just basically decoding patterns, right? That's what it's really about, is the patterns. And so when we're looking at what is the pattern that is activated and what's activated in you, your story is always going to be unique. And that's why the other part of astrology where people get a little bit more, oh, it's predictive. Someone's going to tell me when this is going to, and it's like, that's actually not really the highest form of it. The highest form is, well, Saturn's going through your house of relationship and you're getting a divorce. and at this time in your life, you are confronting all of the structures of your relationships.
Yeah.
And
it's
that's
so wild
cycle for you to embrace and always grow from.
Right.
right?
There's always a choice in the event.
Exactly. It's always choice for us to how we want to see it or how we perceive it, right? So when someone's going through something really intense like a breakup or even job or any of that, they know in their higher self, our oversoul or our connection to that this is a time for something.
Mm-hmm.
Now, our conscious self
Is
is
freaking out.
is freaking out. And it's like
Panic.
panic mode. What is going on? But our higher self, I always say our higher self always knows our clock intimately.
Yeah.
It always senses and understands. And there's been many different, cycles through in my life where and even before 2009 when I started studying astrology, that 2008, I was very unsettled. And there's a lot of stuff going on, but I was really unsettled. And now reflecting, I was preparing for an entire shift that was coming. And
Yeah.
that was very evident in all my astrology that was happening in the chart.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just wild. I mean, and weirdly enough, like I'll reach out to you like every few months or something, and it's always at a point where I'm like, I don't know what's happening. And then you'll look at my chart and you'll be like, oh, well,
Yeah.
Chiron is going through your, house of fun. And so you feel devastated. I'm like, I know. All right. How long is this lasting? What are my options?
The best phrase is this too shall pass.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
It is, but we're in these cycles. So sometimes we're like, there's so much stress and so much anxiety and all these things about the decisions. But we're actually in a moment just having an experience.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when we kind of connected to, well, what is the theme? This has to do with Chiron or Saturn and what comes up, then we get, so much more rich meaning and kind of more context to like really be able to kind of see, what's really happening on a very big picture level. Right.
Yeah. I keep thinking back to the syllabus analogy you just gave, which really feels so correct, where it's like you have the syllabus, and by knowing like what the lesson plan is, you have a better chance of like acing the test. Whereas if you don't know what the lesson is, you're kind of like flailing around like, what am I supposed to be doing? So it's like the free choice is still there. You can ace that test or fail, but knowing what you're being tested on does help you a little bit when you're taking that test.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that because it's really, and right now, a lot of people do feel, I think, or I sense the, a little bit lost, in because there's so much happening out in the world that it's overwhelming every day and another thing. My best advice is don't really pay any attention to any media. Stay informed as you need to, do what you need to, but be very careful of the information that you take in now, because we are going through a big thing. And this goes in, and we can kind of go into like some of the current astrology. Well, let me back up. In 2020, many astrologers knew that it was going to be a dynamic year. Okay. And
What are you talking about?
many people were like, woo, 2020. Why? Because in January of 2020, Saturn made a conjunction to Pluto. And that alignment, doesn't happen so often. And where it is, when things get really rare in astrology, then it becomes super fantastic on Earth. So that alignment was an era defining moment. Saturn, structure, authorities, our work, our, everything that all the Saturn archetypal keywords, and Pluto, power, control, death, rebirth, transformation. These two big guys they move very slow. They were meeting up January of 2020. So astrologers were really looking to that, being like, what is the manifestation of this major alignment? And even later in 2020, in December, Jupiter made a conjunction to Saturn as well. And that's also a very small moving. So these two alignments alone were like, wow, okay, like what is going to manifest?
Yeah.
Again, in astrology, you can't really, it's not this will happen, because in so many ways, there's infinite potentials.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I love to keep that open. There's infinite timelines, infinite potentials. There's so many doors and roads you can take. So by limiting and saying it's this or that, limiting, right? But in 2020, we knew that there had to be some kind of big story.
Right.
And in fact, when this conjunction happened in Capricorn in January, that was just kind of when things were, in China at the end of the year, and it's kind of like, still far away, especially from here, just kind of like another story. I was kind of, because sometimes we'll see a big alignment that day, and then that day something will happen.
Right.
For example, March 11th, Uranus, the planet of sudden unexpected change, moved from Aries into Taurus, and it was Fukushima that day that happened.
Oh, wow.
So oftentimes you'll see an alignment and you'll see an exact manifestation in the field of that energetics. Other times it'll happen and it'll work its way into the field.
Mhm.
So January, I'm like, okay, what's going on? Like, I think it's like January, I can't remember exactly, 12th or something around the second week. And I was like, oh, so I'm like, look in the news, what's happening? Just wait for it.
Yeah.
So by the time we got to March 20, I believe the 22nd is the day that Saturn, which is constriction, stop, isolation, moved into the sign of Aquarius, which is the sign of community.
Mm.
And that week, the world shut down and we all had social isolation. That is how literal astrology is. And at that time, I knew that Saturn was going to move out of Aquarius March of 2023. And I said, this isn't going away till March of 2023.
Wow.
Because that is the signature for the energy that we're going to go through.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what a massive experience.
What a ride.
We've all been through. Nobody on earth has escaped this energetics. And it wasn't, and it's meant we all need to be here for it. Because there's a lot of things we all know aren't working very well in our relations and society and structures. And I think so many souls are here right now to share their love and to really
Mm.
connect, that a lot of people, we all in some ways wanted to be here on earth for this big event, for that connection, that I think when it sparked off so much fear and so many things, right? And this is all contemplating our death, Pluto, Saturn, fear, what can we control, what can we can't control, all of these themes. It really helped us on a different level to come back to ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So our souls were changed forever from that alignment. This case, it just happened to be such a massive event, right? That everybody was pulled into in some way.
Yeah. And we're in it.
And
Yeah.
we're in it.
We're in it.
Well, also like I was listening back to our episodes earlier today, and like, you were talking about how it particularly, I don't want to place like our experience above anyone else's. Everyone has their own unique experience, but I do think as people who live in America, there's like a few different things happening,
Yeah.
right? Because you had talked about like the epochs of change, how like we're going from a Piscean age into an Aquarian age. So that's
Yeah.
like this massively overarching kind of shift that's occurring. And then there was also something going on, I believe, with Pluto going from Capricorn to Aquarius.
Exactly. And that's another big story that's happening. And this is something that we hear a lot too, especially in the United States, about the Pluto return, which is
Right.
like something we want to talk about too for a little bit. Because these alignments, they're happening and everyone is feeling them. So they're collective energies, right? And we're all tapped in, just like Carl Jung said, this to the collective unconscious. We're all tapped into the energetics, right? So these big things are meant to have huge ripple effects and paradigm shifts at this time in our human story, right? So those 2020 alignments, those were so big. Now coming back just to the United States, we hear a lot about the United States having its Pluto return, right? So what that means is that in 1776, Pluto, at the supposed signing, which there's a little, there's a lot of historical debate about when exactly everything happened. But if we look at the chart of July 4th of 1776, Pluto was at 27 degrees and 33 minutes of Capricorn. Okay, so it was in that position. Because Pluto is about 248 year-ish moving, usually is about to go through all the zodiacs. And all the planets have different variations sometimes based on their orbits. That means that this year, the United States is experiencing its Pluto return because Pluto has come back to the position it was when it was under that alignment when it was formed, right? Yeah. So this is also for this country a big deal because Pluto is about what we said, transformation, death and rebirth, and Pluto wants to totally get rid of things that aren't authentic and that aren't in full integrity.
Yeah.
So when we heard earlier this year on 22222, which is my birthday. I mean, I wasn't born 2022, but 222 is my birthday. So I was like,
that's awesome.
Yeah. But so in February, it was actually 2021, and then it kind of got pulled into 22 because of like all the numerology. That time frame is when Pluto got exactly to 2733. Okay. Now, because of this motion and apparent retrograde, which just means that, one car is moving faster and it looks like one's going backwards, Pluto then went retrograde and backed up. And well, let me say it this way. First, it got a little ahead and then it went backwards again. So in July, it made another alignment to that degree. And then there will be a third alignment in December to the same thing. So sometimes we're hearing Pluto return on 2/22/22, but actually Pluto return is 3 times because of the retrograde cycles this year.
Right.
So this year, the energetics really wants to push these Pluto themes in this country. This is why we have so many intense stories, and there are a lot of intense stories, obviously, other places in the world, right? But we live here, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, we're here, and we're really feeling so much of this turmoil, and it's like, and especially again around like information and who's true, who's right, what's the real story. Most of the time with so many of these things, we don't know.
Yeah.
And we'll never know. So how do we deal with this? So the Pluto return for the United States is about a death and rebirth of all of the structures in our society and how they work. And we can see that, especially since what happened in 2020 with COVID, how some things aren't running so well. I mean,
Yeah, I'd
it's
say
like,
I'd say
wait,
there's a little bit of room.
exactly.
Room for
Well,
improvement.
Well, what's also really interesting, we're talking about America and like the Pluto return of America. But then I also think what's wild about it is like it's kind of holding our own relationships around Pluto energy, right? And so we're all, yes, America, the consciousness, the dynamics of our culture and our society are going through wild stuff for the better. But then I also think on a
Mhm.
macro level,
Micro.
micro level,
Yep.
we're all experiencing that too. And that's what's been really interesting for me during this time, especially, is like understanding the energies of these planets and seeing how they interact with, they're kind of like bowling balls, like hitting each other, and like, what is this going to affect? How is this going to play out? But I do like the idea of the time of things is really interesting to me.
Yeah.
2023, 2024. I've heard
Yeah.
2023 and 2024. Is that
So,
right?
continuing, so now that we have this Pluto, because there's 30 degrees,
Right.
29 gets to 29, and then it gets to the new sign, right? So Pluto, remember, Pluto entered Capricorn in 2008 in the beginning. And we all know what went down in 2008. There was a major financial mess. That didn't seem to really get fixed either.
Yeah.
So it's like, are we gonna just keep doing this? And Pluto's like, no. No, it's like you have to stop and really confront, and the things around authority and power and control. I mean, these are all Capricorn Pluto themes. We're talking about every institution, schools, medical, government facilities, everything. We're talking about all the Capricornian banking, all that stuff, right? So as Pluto only moves about 2 degrees a year, so this year, why was it dynamic, is because it got to that same degree. So it's like the United States chart got highly stimulated. And in astrology, the numbers, and we see numerology and how, numbers are so major in sacred geometry, Fibonacci, I mean, everything, right? In astrology, when a planet gets to a number exact with a number in a chart, whether it's yours or a country, the energetics intensifies. It's just it's an experience. And I like to say an example is just like when you wake up on your birthday, the sun is returned to the place it was when you were born. Whether you're a birthday person or not, you feel energetic that day on a level, because there's a interaction in the field, right? So Pluto is finishing up its journey through Capricorn. Sometimes it stays because it moves in a oval. It's not a circle. Some signs it'll stay for 13 years. Some it'll go into 20s. It depends on what's happening with its orbit. So Pluto is reaching the end of Capricorn. And those last 3 degrees are critical. The first 3 degrees, critical degrees in astrology. Last 3 degrees, critical degrees. So things start to expedite really quickly. And this is, I see a lot of times too. Let's say if someone's going through a 2-year transit and they've been working, growing, and they got about 4 months left.
It goes wild.
It's got to complete. So sometimes the little stuff really starts coming.
So
fast.
it's the first 3 and the last 3 are the most
critical degrees, they're called in astrology, which is just the activating. The first 3 would be first embracing, embodying the energy. And then the last 3 will be the fullness of the energy of whatever sign it is. So Pluto is reaching the conclusion of its journey through Capricorn, which again, it won't come back for 240 some years, right?
Yep.
And so this year, why it was so dynamic is because it's exact with the United States chart. And we can see very, very clearly, you know, what's going on and how, you know, we all need to kind of, well, I feel like really center ourselves and bring ourselves back to this place of more self-love,
Mm.
more self-acceptance of the person we planned to be.
I like how
Which
you
is what
described that.
helps everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, how do I help? What do I do? It's just like, love yourself because you planned you and you, that's who you, and we hear this all the time, of course, self-love, but this is really the key now, like self-love. So what's going to happen in 2023 is that Pluto is going to go and cross that threshold and get to 0 degrees of Aquarius. So Pluto's going to end the Capricorn. And then in 2023, Pluto's going to break into the whole Aquarian energy. Now, because of retrogrades, Pluto will return to Capricorn for a little bit. And then we'll fully get into 2024.
Right.
So
Got it.
we're going to have, we're working with, and it's a very, you know, on the cusp of anything is like 1 foot here, 1 foot there. So we can see so much of how people are doing so many amazing things. And especially because of COVID and creating so many communities, new ideas, new things with the earth, things of this. How do we be, you know, obviously more caring towards things? How do we understand that so much? So when we look at the media, we see a pretty sad story. But underneath, for the last years, so many amazing things have been changing. And
See, Leslie, you sound like me. I've been saying this on the podcast so much.
Yeah.
I'm saying, like, watch what you read because
Yeah.
obviously there's so much horrible shit happening, but like also like there's amazing things happening too,
Yes.
and it just doesn't get highlighted.
It doesn't. And
Yeah.
people are coming together and all these different communities and ways of relating and helping and sharing. I mean, there's so many, and we don't, this is the old thing is like, you don't fix the system, you create a new one. And that's what's been happening
Mm.
under
Yeah.
the surface. Okay. And especially when we think about taking some of our power back with our health, right? And being like, oh, I got to really, especially with COVID, I got to really look at my health. How am I treating myself? And that's helped to bring some more of the authority back to ourselves, right? In some ways. So there's a lot of subtle things that have been happening. And even before that, for years, I mean, I can tell you so many clients that I've talked to work in, and especially most of the people I talk to are women, they work in finance, high-level positions. They work in the military, high-level positions. They work in government institutions. They work in bank. They're all leaving because they're like, this isn't working, and I want to create this. In media, and some of these big, they're like, this is not, there's something off here. So I want to create my own news channel, my own news thing. So this is happening massively, and it's been building for years and years.
Yeah.
When Pluto gets into Aquarius, it's just going to be more like a rocket. It's just going to take off more and more.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, that's how I've kind of been viewing this whole time. It's like, how do I want to move through the world? Who do I want to be with? What kind of structures do I want to like be day to day with? And I think it's, while it's like totally chaotic, like there's something like deeply powerful about all of this and like creating, I mean, honestly, it's just creating a new paradigm and a new world to live in. But then I also think at the same time, the other one will exist too. I think I just want to flip into another dimension, like just scoot over.
Yeah, and and I'm glad you say this because this is important about this chaos, perceived chaos and order, and coming back to really our connection to ourselves and to earth and to source, and really strengthening that connection.
Yeah.
It is
Love
so important right now, because this is how it's in a way can help us navigate things when we listen to our inner guidance in our
Mhm.
inner self. And we have to keep coming back to that now. You know, when the blackout happened in New York, were you guys here when they
Yeah,
had,
I was.
it was like 2000, when was it, Jeremiah? 2014 or 13?
Um, well, there's been a couple. There
Well,
were a couple.
it was more recent when all the lights went out. I think it
Oh,
was in August.
was
No,
Sandy? No.
mm-mm.
I
Oh,
don't know.
there was one in the early 2000s. Because I remember I was working.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, you're right.
It was
2000,
like 2004 or
yeah,
2003.
exactly.
Yeah.
2003, 2004. At 4 in the afternoon
Yeah.
in Manhattan, I was working. All the electricity went out. Okay. And that was what I guess there was. And then it ended up being the whole East Coast, right? Because it had started like in Ohio. And then, so I was working down by Canal Street, and it was like, 4 something. And so no one's got power. So everybody just went outside, because what are you going to do, right? Everybody's like, it's hot, it's August, no power. Everybody went out into the street. Now, I used to always meet my husband in Soho on Prince and Broadway, and then we would take the train together because he was working in Soho. So nothing was working, right? Everything was, and I just was to myself, oh, go to Prince and Broadway. He'll be there, like telepathically. Okay. So I go through, and there he is standing on the corner waiting for me. But you would think that it was total chaos, right?
Yeah.
It
Right.
wasn't. It
Yeah.
was organized.
Yeah, it was amazing.
It was amazing. And, everybody had a walk, and then everybody was eating ice cream, and there was like, so we also again have this perception like, oh, shit's gonna go crazy and everyone's gonna go nuts. And I'm like, no. In a situation, humans are so responsive and ingenious and like amazing and like heart-centered, right? Like that there wasn't chaos.
Mm,
It was organized in a way,
right.
you know?
Organized chaos.
Organized chaos. And that's kind of, so that's a little example is like, hey, things are intense, sure, but we figure out a way to navigate through it. This is what we're doing, and we're all helping each other in that way. And in connecting and having your own, whether it's ceremony, meditation, to sort, this is so important too now, right? Being in nature. The last 25 years I spend camping, where, pack a pack and go out and sleep in a tent and be there for 5 days. This is why, in many ways, with the work that I'm doing, I have all these messages and I have all this intuition and I have all these insights, is because I've been building this connection to the earth,
Mhm.
right? And we all do it in our own ways. Everybody's got, again, their own truth. But this is like one of the most important things right now, is like to navigate, like to really drive the boat, feeling lost at sea, is to bring yourself back into some type of practice, tools. Go see Celine for treatment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stick plug. Stick plug.
Esoteric astrology, like, whoa, she's doing there? Like we have to, and I know, Jeremiah meditation and all the, we have to really make these things our priority in our life right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was something I was going to ask you. I was going to be like, well, what are your like hot tips for this hot time?
Yeah.
And there you go. You did it. It's
And that's something that's like, you're going to be guided. So like circling back a little bit to our astrology, I have a little story. So we're in a Mercury retrograde right now.
Yep.
And that happens 3 to 4 times a year. And I'll talk a little bit in a second. But Mercury in Libra made an alignment, a conjunction to my Pluto in my chart. about a week or so ago. So I knew I had a sense of Mercury and Pluto are meeting up. Mercury's the messenger. Oh, interesting. See what kind of messages are going to come. So that morning I wake up, and this is our astrology, and this is our transits, and this is how it is. It's always happening. That morning I wake up and I'm like, oh my God, I forgot the emissions on my car is expiring. So this was a little over a week ago because it was August 31st. Okay. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to go today. So I go down to the Midas store, which I love those guys for oil changes. They're super cool over there. I'm chatting with people at Midas. Okay.
Saturn. The
Yeah.
Saturn store.
So we're going, da, 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 da. I come back and I walk on the street, and here on the ground, can you guys see, is the King of Diamonds.
Oh my God.
So in New York, there's a lot of crap on the ground everywhere, but I have been getting playing cards, and I've been doing this for over 10 years, and they give me messages because every playing card is a tarot card.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. That
No.
happened to me literally a few days ago. I saw a card
Okay.
on the street and I looked it up and I was like, that was
Oh,
totally a message. Yeah.
yeah. So I get the card, and then I take a screenshot, and then I look at the chart, and then it's like mind blown. So King of Diamonds, I was like, "Ooh, that's a king card," and I was like, "Diamonds." It's like, that's pentacles. I was like, oh my God. So I go to my favorite learntarot.com, which is just basic and simple, and the description is the King of Midas. You have the Midas touch. Now,
I mean,
Midas 2 hours prior. Mercury was exactly conjunct by Pluto, and I was having a kind of off couple days. And so here the message for me is, you're doing great. You're doing great. Everything you touch to gold, keep going. So we're getting these divine instructions and messages and guidance flowing from our ancestors, from our spirit team, from our guides, from everybody, all the time, always helping us. But we don't get to access it if we're distracted.
1000%.
And especially from what I just in 2001, the movie with the monolith.
Yeah.
No.
Apes around it. Do you know that opening scene of 2001 is a bunch of apes, and they throw up a bone, and there's just a monolith that's black.
Mm.
And I remember seeing that movie so long ago, being like, I don't get it. I'm not it really kind of was and now
It's your phone.
Oh, dang.
And I'm like, oh, now I get the monolith. So we got to be very also careful with the monolith, because if you're involved in a reality that you're not creating, you're not necessarily open to receiving these little messages, which are always coming for you.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's so many people who are just so tapped into a plug, right? And it's hard to get out of it. So I hope that, everybody listening just thinks hey, maybe I don't need to look at my phone a bunch today, or, because you have to cultivate that practice of stillness and connection and unplugging. And I think there's a big element of trust and trusting in yourself and the universe, and that, it takes moments, it takes time.
And you will be encouraged the more you do it.
Yeah. So little by little.
Little by little, little by
little.
And it's just having that kind of right relationship, because again, with everything going on, a lot of people, oh, what should I do about this? What should I do about this? And we're searching for these answers. We're Googling it. Googling it, it's you tell us. The version of me pre-phone Google would be well, huh? We're Googling it, we're doing all of these things. And again, technology, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's super rad.
There's so much that it's amazing. And the people listening get to listen to this cover all over the world,
I mean, we're doing this on technology.
We're doing this on technology. So it's amazing, but we have to have a very disciplined relationship with it now, because it was a shiny new toy for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Because it was like, oh, all the stuff that I can do this and apps and all this. It's like, oh. Now, okay, we're how many years in? 2006, 7, Pluto hit the galactic center. We got the iPhone, like, I mean, so we're in now. We gotta be like, okay, let's use this in the way. So that's kind of another hot tip is like nature, number one.
Nature is your boy or gal.
Whenever you need it,
Yeah.
it's going to support you and it's going to help you heal. And then 2, we have to really be aware, I think, a little bit of that relationship, just not because it's never good, bad, it's just, but again, just for the reason that you aren't as open when you're distracted, like you're not as receptive. And there's so many forces and energetics or whatever you want to say working for you and to help you with that divine plan that you plan,
Yeah.
So that's also important.
Yeah. It's, I mean, yes, 100% yes. 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 Yes.
Okay, last thing, maybe just a little bit about the current astrology.
Sure. Yeah, because there's 6 planets in retrograde.
Okay, so when you think about, I want to talk a little bit about Mercury retrograde and then Mars real quick, okay?
Okay.
This is also an important phenomenon to understand because it happens 3 to 4 times a year. And why Mercury retrograde? Sometimes 4, sometimes it'll happen between December into January. But generally, it's always 3, 4 times a year. Okay, Mercury is ruling. It's the cogs in the clock. It's the gears in the clock. This is Mercury. Get to here, go to here, communicate here, have this meeting, talk, do this contract, do this thing. Blah, blah. It's all that little in the clock, all those little gears. This is Mercury, commerce, energy. It's like moving things along. And Mercury, in its motion, loves to move things along. Okay, that's great. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's go here. Let's go there. It's ruled by Gemini and Virgo, which like to do stuff. Like, okay, I like to do stuff and analyze and communicate and do things, learn things, go there, be of service. This is all like Mercury's role. Okay. When Mercury enters the shadow is the degree that Mercury will eventually back up to. And it's so clockwork. So Mercury entered the shadow on August 21st. What that meant is that it got to 8 degrees of Libra. It was going to back up into Virgo, stop, and then go back and then clear 8 degrees. So when it comes to 8 the first time, it's introducing, I'm going to slow down. Because when Mercury goes sometimes 1 to 2 degrees in a day, when Mercury stations, which was September 9th, it stays at 1 degree for over a week. So we enter into a period where we go into a slowdown. And nothing in our culture wants anyone to slow down. Now, do it. It's like a New Yorker going to the West Coast for coffee.
It's so accurate.
On 1 minute. And it's like, oh, right, I'm in California. Okay. Take a break. It's like, okay. It's like, wait, where's that? So, slowing down, being more reflective, thinking about things. This is the process of Mercury retrograde. So when we actually enter into the cycle, then we're in the review. And this is what astrologers always say: review, redo, reconsider, all the rewords. We always talk about that. This is what it's time for. So it's not so much things are to spark off and it's that you're working a little bit against the energy. It's not that, you can't, but there's a little, it's like a little swimming upstream. You got a little bit of resistance because we're in a slowdown. Mercury goes direct October 2nd, and then it still takes time to clear the shadow, which is the degree that it started, right? And so that's October 17th. So even though retrograde is actually just a couple weeks, September 9th It's the whole thing. And it's a process, and it's something that we don't need to be afraid of or worry about or any of these things. We just have to learn to live in the rhythm of it. That's all.
Yeah. I think the Mercury retrogrades gets just like, it's just been blown up so much.
It is. And you know
Oh,
why?
yeah.
Is because it's a phenomenon like the full moon and like the new moon that people can grasp onto
Right.
in
It's
astrology.
excessive. Yeah. It's like a Mercury's in retrograde. Oh my God.
They notice the losing the keys, the phone breaking, this
Your lights breaking.
getting changed around, appointments shifting.
Yeah.
And exes coming back.
Well, it's kind of to your point, Celine, earlier with like people like being in control, and Mercury in retrograde is like the constant lesson that you're not in control.
Love that. It's true. So just go with the flow. And
Yeah.
if you really need some insight, get quiet. Right? And Mercury is a trickster. It will rearrange everything just so you get a certain point. It's happy to reroute you. It's so like you get to like, oh, right. It loves to do that. So it's something that we have to learn as that's something that we're experiencing and work with that versus like all of these other things that are like, oh no. And it's something that's a process.
Mm-hmm.
So this is something we go through every couple months, right? The other thing I want to mention, and this is something that's a little bit bigger, is that every about 2 years, Mars goes retrograde. And so Mars retrograde is the re-stuff of all of our Mars, our action, our energy, our courage, our drive, all the Mars archetypal energies. So on September 4th, people can go back and think in their calendar, the 3rd, the 4th, a little even on the 5th. Anything that sticks out that was extraordinary around, that was Mars' shadow for its upcoming retrograde, which is going to be October 30th to January 12th. And then Mars will clear the cycle about March 18th or so, around that time. And this Mars retrograde is all happening in Gemini. So if you got a lot of Gemini, you're having a big 6 months, because this Mars retrograde, everybody's got Gemini somewhere in their chart, right? So that's where it's happening. But this one, why I want to kind of come back to, again, what we were talking about, Gemini is about information, right? And what do we take in, and what do we share? So this is a really lovely opportunity of really getting clear about your communication, your information, things that how you think, your thought patterning. So Mars is not as often as Mercury in its cycle, but it is a big deal. The other thing that's really interesting is because Mars is part of the masculine, right? And, we all have all feminine and all masculine. So we have Venus archetype of the feminine. And interesting enough, Venus and the moon are the only two feminine energies. Everything else is masculine.
Oh, that's true.
Sometimes people say Mercury can be a little androgynous. It can be a little bit of both. But every archetype of all the planets, until you get into the minor asteroids.
Right. Like, what are they called? Aries or something?
Like
Cirrus.
Pallas Athene.
Yeah, there they are. Of course, the women are secondary.
They're all like,
come on.
4 major archetypes, like the secondary, are all feminine archetypes. So it's like, I'm like, okay, when are we gonna
all right
in here?
What else is
new? It's interesting because when Mars goes retrograde, the masculine has a shift. This
interesting.
is something I've noticed over quite a few years is Mars retrogrades, how the masculine acts, or and in some ways how men handle this. It's a different transit. It's a different experience because we're all reviewing some of our masculine energies. during a Mars retrograde.
Hmm.
So like, how you been feeling since the 4th? And this is what's so cool too about astrology is like it's always like I always say this like the foreshadowing. In some ways we think we're just getting thrown into something. No. We always get a little nugget beforehand and a little nugget here and a little and then it's like, oh, but again, are we paying attention?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I think that's kind of the takeaway, right? Like,
Yeah.
pay attention to yourself and your body and your environment
Yes.
and move with it.
And also with this Mars and Gemini, what are your beliefs? And this is something that was so huge because we all know, and we're all like, when we go back to these new paradigm with the Saturn conjunction and Pluto, and one of the things that I think everybody on some level, in a way, I feel a little bit more psychic, a little bit more telepathic, a little bit more like, oh, I've thought about this. And I feel like people are just like really coming online to that perception because it's always been there. But I think that there's something about this time that is increasing the qualities in people. Because there's people who are very much born, just like if you have an athletic gift or a music gift, right? Some people are born more with that pattern, that connection. But we all have it. And so also what we really want to examine is our beliefs about things, because this is where everything is patterned in our subconscious. Right? What do you believe about yourself, about this? And this is a really good time for people to examine that too. What are my beliefs?
Yeah.
Because when you think about beliefs, they come from the belief about something, and then the thought is an energy. We're coming to understand our thoughts are actually things, right?
Yeah.
And other people feel our thoughts. They sense it. Even if we're like, oh man, I don't want to let anybody know I'm thinking that. I bet you someone in the room is like, someone's like, they're really, so we're being able to really perceive these thoughts, I think, on a different level. And there's an attunement, I feel like, happening in part of this paradigm shift where people are being more perceptive to it or open to it or connect more deeper to it or notice the things that they think are more coincidences, which don't exist in astrology.
I know. They don't exist in general.
That was like coincidence. I was like, energy, it's energy, right?
Yeah.
So also something that we can do is pay attention more also to our beliefs and what do we believe about something, because that's a lot of shaping our reality, especially like, again, when we're talking about Gemini, our thought patterning, our communication, what we think, our information, but really, what do we believe? I have a lot, people that, sometimes I'll work with, they'll come and they want to, talk about relationships, right? And their like first thing is like, I'm ready for the one. And I'm like, great. And they're like, but I'm never gonna find them.
Oh.
And I'm like, wait a minute.
That's
like,
not how it works.
wait. That's a fundamental disconnect, right? Like in the same sentence.
Yeah.
And it comes from that belief that it's hard. No one is right for me, all sorts of things, programs in our society, programs in our family, programs in our lineage, so many places where these beliefs get, put onto us or that we carry from past lives.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So then we have to stop and be like, wait a minute, what is my belief about love? And really get into the core. So that's also kind of something we can work on right now with this Mars retrograde, and even with Mercury, in retrograde for a little bit still. What are our beliefs about things? And if you're having something going on major in your life right now, sit down. Okay, what's my belief about money? What is there? What is that? What's my belief about family or relationships or work? What are those? So that we can kind of really examine. And I did this exercise myself recently because I have some, my own syllabus work clearly, or just like, and when I got down to like some of the beliefs and stuff, I was like, wow, that's actually, I hear that my mom's saying that actually isn't my belief. Like, we start to root out like really what's ours and what's not.
Yeah.
That's important right now too.
God, these are so helpful. So
Oh,
like,
yay.
yeah, I just think it's everything you've said has just been so helpful in terms of like how to navigate the weather
Yeah.
with all this stuff and on
Yay.
a personal level, society wise, you know. So
Well, like I said at the beginning of the episode, we're back in school, astrology school.
In school.
welcome to that.
My husband says it's funny. He's like, on my card, it just should say astrologer, the confirmer. And he's like kind of what it's like. It's just confirming mostly already what you already know, but then bringing it back into it. And so, this is part of what I love about astrology.
Yeah, it's
that-
the coolest.
Yeah.
It's the coolest. I feel complete and like you really everything I wanted to ask somehow intuitively you did. You really did, honestly. I wanted to ask about retrogrades and like
Okay. Yeah.
so you did it.
Yeah. And it's interesting that phenomenon too, because like I said, everyone feels it so deeply because we're all connected to this field. We're
Yeah.
all connected to each other. We're all part of the field. We're all here. We're all creatures. All the creatures that are here, we're a creature. Love
Yeah.
your creaturehood.
Huh.
Like we get so much of the ego and human, and I'm like, or the ego of like me and this and I, and the ego is very important to get stuff done, but we also got to remember, like, we're also these creatures here, bringing
like
it back,
moving around.
creaturehood,
Yeah.
Yep.
Jared, do you have any specifics you want to ask Leslie?
No, I mean, I feel like Leslie, you covered a lot.
did everything.
And like,
Yay!
yeah,
Oh,
that was
thank
awesome.
you so
It was
much for having me.
Wait,
Pleasure.
before you go though, where do people find you if they want to have a session with you?
Yeah, so my website is Our Cosmic Day, OUR Cosmic Day, and that's also my Instagram.
Okay.
And so on my website, it's just pretty basic, and then it shows where you can book a session.
Great.
And then sessions are really geared to tap into, first of all, what's happening right now, right? So this is like when I'm working with people, someone new who's coming for a reading, the first thing I do is, okay, let's talk about the story of what's now.
Mm-hmm.
Life cycle, age, and then what personal cycle, and what's the big theme. So my readings are very much I'm focused on like, okay, where are you at in your divine plan, right? And what's happening around you. So usually after I go through a few things, then I stop and I'm like, okay, does that resonate? And then this is when people think that I'm like crazy psychic, and how was I in their head, and how did I know everything that they were thinking? And it's
You're
like,
well,
it's just in your chart. I mean, like, okay,
like,
I
I just
am
looked it up.
intuitive, I'm getting messages. I'm a lot of Pisces. That's a part of it for sure. And connecting into, I often in the readings get visual messages and things that I say too. So that's definitely part of it. But I really like to focus on, okay, where are you at on this soul path? And then I like to go into the syllabus. Like, what are all your strengths? I love focusing on your gifts because we don't hear it enough. Like, oh my God, you're such a gifted listener, or you're such a gifted talker, you're such a gifted, caretaker. We're so focused so many times on the things that we should be doing or need to do or improve on. So I love to talk about, what are you so good at? Like, what is it? And it shines through in the chart. And then we get into a little bit more of what are the big growths in this lifetime, and what are some of your big points that you're learning through or growing through. And we focus on that. And that's something that when Celine, before we got on, we were talking a little bit about the nodes of karma. That's something that I focus on heavily in the chart. Your north and south node show the direction that your soul is moving into. So the south node is your mastery. The north node is the patterns which you want to grow. So I
Mhm.
focus a lot on this journey because it's from day 1 to the last day. We all move from the south node to the north node. And then I also like to focus on Saturn, and what are the lessons through Saturn. So a reading brings a lot of different elements. It's a lot of information, but I always tell people they always know everything already that I'm going to talk about.
I mean, I'll say Leslie's a great reader, and I
Oh,
go to her.
yeah.
I see you like I think twice a year.
Yeah.
Every 6 months, coincidentally.
Oh, and always when you call, I'm always like, I need a tune up.
Yeah, and so we do.
Always been very connected that way.
I know. So, well, thank you so much for doing this. This is so amazing. It was so helpful. It was
Yes.
so
Thank you.
inspiring.
Yay!
This was really wonderful. So much good info. So many like good things, like takeaways for people, like, oh my
Good.
God. Awesome.
So great.
Yay!
So great. Well, that's it. That's
Boom.
it. Boom. Bye. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, Leslie, thank you so much again for gracing us with your presence. We shouldn't wait 3 years for you to come back on the show.
Oh, no.
We got to do this again.
Yeah, and I was just listening to because Celine, you were talking about Graham.
Graham.
Wait.
Yeah, the galactic astrologer.
Yeah, and I was listening to that because when I realized it was video, I was like, oh right, okay, well let me listen because you had mentioned that, and that was great. Super
Interesting, right?
Yeah, a lot of interesting stuff there too.
So far out, so fun.
Super
It's so
cool, you guys. Super cool.
Super cool. All right. Well, hopefully see you soon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks so
Alright.
much, Leslie. Really appreciate it. All the best.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.